John teaches Sean about his brain. The podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it? And why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John teaches Sean about his brain. Let's get started. Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Hey, Sean. Great seeing you. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. So I was just curious, what's on your mind this week?
Well, a couple of days ago, I was on X, Twitter X, and I follow this handle called Curiosity. It's at M Astronomers, and they put some really cool stuff on there. And they had a picture this week of, I think the astronaut was spacewalking because it showed their little spaceship module in the picture. He was taking a picture of the spaceship module, and it was floating above the moon. So you could see it was the surface of the moon. So the spaceship's in the picture, the moon's in the picture. And then off in the distance, the very, very far distance, you can see Earth. And so they just had a caption on there, something like that Michael Collins was the astronaut and said he's the only human, dead or alive, that's not in this picture, which was kind of a cool way to think about it. This was in 1969. And so he took the picture, and everything that's happened in humanity took place within that frame of that picture, which was just kind of wild to think about.
Oh yeah, we're starting off strong here. This is going to break my brain. 1969. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But that's a really cool way of thinking about this.
That just made me think. Not everybody was in the picture. I was. You weren't.
I
in that
was
picture,
not.
Were you? You weren't in that
I was
picture.
not. I was not in that picture. So that actually incorrect. That's predates me by about 5 years. But
so at the time of the picture, at that exact moment, people weren't really doing selfies back then, were they? No. He could have just turned and got himself and captured everybody.
And the very first selfie.
And it would have been the very first selfie, every human, dead or alive, all of it would have happened. But Mike decided to be on the other side of the camera, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Well, I have a question for you, but it requires a little bit of a story. So I apologize for that. But a couple of days ago, my wife and I, we had some errands to run, and we had 3 stores that we were going to go to. And so before we even got in the vehicle, she told me what stores they were, and I was kind of mapping it. And all 3 of the stores are within 10 minutes of the house. We're pretty centrally located, but they're all in different directions from the house. So I was kind of in my head plotting a route, where I was going to go. And I really just thought, okay, so I know the order of the stores that we're going to go to. I'm going to go to this store first, this one second, this one third. So we go to the first store, take care of that, get in the car, and we're driving to the second store. And my wife is telling me a story that I'm interested in. So I'm listening to her relating this story to me. I'm driving, so I'm trying to pay attention to vehicles around me, kind of just everything that goes with driving a vehicle. And then I'm approaching this intersection, and the street is Tyler, maybe not that important, but I'm thinking, ooh, when I leave the second store, I'm going to turn on Tyler to get to the third store. My wife's still telling me the story. I'm listening, I'm driving. And all of a sudden I look up and I say out loud, why am I at this light? And I realize I am turning left on Tyler. And I didn't want to be turning left on Tyler right now. So I'm sitting in the turn lane staring at this red arrow. And I got really frustrated because this isn't the route I wanted to go. All these things happen at once. And it's really funny because when I said out loud, why am I turning here? My wife said, I was wondering the same thing. I didn't know what you were doing. So, I make the turn, and it's not that big of a deal. It just added, we got to go all the way around now to get to the second store. And I've been waiting to talk to you because the question I wanted to ask is, why did my brain betray me? What happened?
Because your brain didn't betray you. Your brain did what it's supposed to do and what we want it to do. Sometimes when it's doing things we want it to do, it works 99% of the time, but that 1%, it's like, I wish it wouldn't have done that this time. But it has to do that all the time, so it fills in the other 99% of the time doing it the right way. So your brain went on autopilot. You probably heard that before. Like,
I've heard that before, autopilot. Yeah.
So to explain it a little bit, maybe better, I'm going to need to talk a little bit about the brain, if that's okay first, and then I'll come back and answer your question.
Okay.
So the brain, you can think of it like this. The brain has two minds that it operates on. And those two minds have been called different things at different times. This idea really came about, I think, in the 1990s, when it was like the dual processing of cognition, where we're thinking with two different processing systems. So sometimes the analogy of a computer is used, where you say, the brain's a hard drive and the minds are the software that it runs. But I don't like that analogy very well. I don't think it captures it very well. But the Stanovic and Kahneman were some of the first scientists to really look into this or start talking about it. And when you're the first on the scene of discovering something, you get the opportunity to name it. And scientists are so creative. They come up with some of the best names sometimes. And I thought theirs was really good. They came up with, and I'm not sure who came up with it actually, but in the literature is known as System 1 and System 2. So it's kind of like Thing 1 and Thing 2. It's like, you had your opportunity. Why did you waste it on System 1 and System 2? But it's the idea that System 1 is a part of the brain that's fast and automatic, and System 2 is more slow and methodical and thoughtful. And our brain operates on both of these systems. Does that make sense so far?
Somewhat, but I don't want to drag you too far back, but you made a distinction between brain and mind. And so I've heard both of those terms before. And even I think at the beginning of this podcast, I asked you what's on your mind. And that might not have been the best way to say it. But so just really quick, it would help me differentiate between your mind and your brain.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't flow as well to say what's on your brain. So what's on your mind?
It doesn't sound right, but yeah.
And it's also more accurate to say what's on your mind. So
okay,
I'm sure there's, you've heard something, you said if you ask 10 people, you get 10 answers. This one's probably, if you ask 10 people, you'll get 2 or 3 answers, because there's some differences in how people think about it. But here's how I think about it. The brain, and I'm right. Everybody else is wrong.
Oh, okay. That's a good stance to take.
Here's the right way to think about it. No, I'm kidding. But this is how I think about it. The brain is the biological, kind of the the biomatter that's sitting in your skull. It's the thing that you can take out of the skull. You can hold it, you can look at it, you can weigh it, you can measure it, and then so it's the physical side of it.
Right.
And so then you can talk about like neurons and glial cells and all of those things. But then the outputs and outcomes of the brain's workings is the mental side of it, and that's the mind. And you can't take the mind out and hold it, and you can't weigh it, and you can't measure it. The mind is what the brain does, like its outcomes. Does that
That
make
is
sense?
that It does to me. That actually is really helpful. I've never heard anyone explain it like that before. So then if we can go back to talking about the mind then and the output part, you said that what we're calling system one
Mm-hmm.
uh, is, you said fast and frugal
Mm-hmm.
and
Automatic. Yep.
automatic,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes mistakes. You
Yeah,
said,
and there's some other names for it too. So people will call it like automatic versus controlled. So system one's automatic, system two is controlled. They'll call it reflexive, which is system one, and reflective, system two, because it's more thoughtful and thinking through stuff. Or like Kahneman that I mentioned wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's those two systems. It's fast is system one and slow is system two. But I'm going to introduce some new terms that I want to
okay,
use on this podcast when we're talking about it, just because it makes a little bit more sense to me. I think it makes sense to people when they're hearing it. Once you learn it, it doesn't at first. You have to know the definition, but once you don't know the definition, I think it's really helpful. And
okay,
this wasn't. I wish this was my idea, but it wasn't. A friend of mine, Mike Askins, who's the uh, was he retired, but he was the psychologist for the Pennsylvania State Police. I was asking him one time, how can I explain these two systems to police officers when I'm talking to them about stuff? And he said, I think you should use their police radio as an analogy. And so I did. But then when I started talking also to people in industrial safety and other areas, I expanded it to just talk about your cable television set. So it's your police radio or your cable television set. But if you think about your cable television, you have, 200 channels that are your option, depending on the package you buy. And then you've got
hmm,
streaming that adds a lot more. But you have all these options of what you want to watch, but you're only watching one thing at a time. So whatever channel you tune into, that's the information you're aware of and that you're watching. So that's the one system. That's system two, the thoughtful, slow, deliberate system, because you understand what's happening in that system. So that's your on channel, because that's a channel you're on and watching. There are
that
tons of
makes
other
sense.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
tons of other things going on the other channels as well, but you're not aware of the plots and the stories or the news or the sports or whatever's on those channels, because that information is being taken care of on the back channels. So the back channel is your system one, the fast automatic system, because you're unaware of what's happening in your back channel. You're only aware of what's happening in your on channel. That's your conscious awareness. So conscious awareness is your on channel. Non-conscious processes are your back channel.
Okay. I
Does that
like
make
that. I will
sense?
start. Yeah, I will start using those terms to describe those two minds, those two systems. So
Okay.
I system. So then the on channel that we're
Mm-hmm.
calling it, that's what I'm watching right now. I like the cable TV, even though I'm from a law enforcement background. The radio makes complete sense to me, but watching television, I'm aware of what's going on. Um, but and then the back channel, all of those, there's a lot more going on in the back channel. Is that fair to say?
Yes. In fact, it's not even close the amount of processing that's going on between the two channels. So it's estimated that for every 1 bit of data processing that your on channel is doing, your back channel is taking care of about 250,000 bits of data that it's processing. So that's a
Wow.
huge difference. That's like, 1 to 250,000. I did this the other day. I was thinking about this, and if you imagine that each data bit that's being processed is a brick, and you were going to
Okay.
build a brick wall with these bits of information, the the bits of information that the back channel is taking care of would be 250,000 bricks high, which reaches our atmosphere. That's really high. It would be
Yeah.
like stacking Mount Denali on top of Mount Everest, I think, something like that. It's just that
Oh,
it would just be a huge, huge wall.
okay. Yeah.
That, and so that's really big. And then to look at what the on channel does compared to that would just be one more row of bricks on the top. And that's what we're aware of. We're only aware of that one row of bricks on the very top at the edge of the atmosphere of what our brain's doing, while the rest of the brain is doing all of the other 250,000 bricks of information
And
outside
that's
of that
all
brain.
stuff that I'm not even aware of. I don't even know that's going on for the most part.
Yeah, at all, really. So I mean, it's taking care of things like your breathing, your heart rate, keeping you alive, all of your vital signs and stuff like that. But it's doing so many other things. So think of the on channel as being that's what that's happening around you. That's what you're aware of, and so it can understand what's happening. It uses logic and reasoning to try to understand things. It wants to find cause and effect relationships for why things are happening. Like, why did that just happen? It must be because this happened before. So it tries to put those types of things together to get a better understanding of the world. It's where your knowledge about how things work are pulled into the on channel to try to figure things out. Your back channel is running on completely different sets of rules. It's based on instincts that have been wired into your system for millions of years. It's based on
Hmm.
drives for food, sex, shelter. It includes, part of survival is conserving resources. So it's always looking to take shortcuts to find easier, quicker ways to do things. It's always wanting to automate things. That's the kind of the automatic side of it. It wants to automate things because if you're using conscious control to do something, that burns up precious resources. And while it's not as important today because we don't have to worry about our resources as much, if you put your feet up instead of planting that row of corn, it's okay because you can order Taco Bell and have it delivered to you. So it's not like we need those resources as much, but our brain's still wired to try to conserve those resources. And so there's like, it's where biases and habits and schemas, all kinds of things are housed in the back channel part of the brain. So it's doing so many things. It's looking for patterns. It's doing a ton of stuff. And then it also has to initiate thoughts and behaviors. Almost every thought and behavior is initiated in the back channel. And it comes forward as urges and impulses.
Mm.
And
So
then, yeah.
sorry I just before I let you go too far, I just something occurred. You've used the word processing a couple of times, and like so I'm thinking of like a computer, like processing power. Do we know? Do you know? Does science know what's the capability of the back channel, and is there a number, even an average something?
No, I think the only way to kind of get a grasp of it, to start to get a grasp of it, is when you compare the processing power of the on channel and the back channel, because we know what we're aware of. And it feels like the
Hmm.
on channel feels like this is the extent of who I am as a human. Like everything that I understand that's happening around me right now is what I do, and that's it. There can't be much beyond that because this is what I'm aware of. But that's just a drop in the bucket to everything that's actually going on. So the processing power differences, I would say, would be that ratio of 1 to 250,000.
And that's okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Bringing it back to that, and then and so you used a word there that I've heard you use before, but you said schemas,
Yep.
and I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think we owe an entire episode to probably schemas and some other things surrounding them. But what if you could just briefly kind of describe schema is a fun word to say, but I still have no idea really what it is.
Yeah, we should talk about schemas at some point. A schema is a mental model of the world that, as you start experiencing your world, your brain starts to put together kind of a model of what that thing looks like. And then the more times you experience it, the more refined your model gets so that you understand it better. So if you are going to, I mentioned Taco Bell, you have a schema for fast food restaurants and you have a schema for fancy restaurants. And so as you pull up to, even if it's a restaurant, you're traveling, let's say, to a new town in a different state that you live in, and you pull off, you say, well, there's a restaurant, and you pull off to eat there, and it's a square building with glass from floor to ceiling around three sides of it with a door in it, and you can see an overhang on one side without even having to consciously think, I wonder what type of restaurant this is. You just know, you're going, oh, this is a fast food restaurant. And you pull in and you expect, I could drive around to the back of the building and probably order my food there and pick it up at a window in my car. Or I could walk in and there's probably a counter with the menu on the wall above the counter, and I order and pay, and then I take my food in a tray and go sit down at one of the tables and eat it. So you have those schemas of how things work. If you didn't have schemas, each time you walked into a restaurant, it would be this whole new experience and you wouldn't know what to expect. It would be like, whoa, I don't even know what's going on here.
Hmm.
So schemas give you an idea to help you understand your world very quickly and very efficiently. So you're not, again, using neural resources to try to figure out what's happening.
All happening in the back channel.
All of that
Just
in the
being done
back
for me, essentially.
in a split second. And that's a lot of
Yeah.
processing that's going on. A lot of processing power is being used, but not nearly as much as if the on channel was trying to figure it out. That uses way more resources than the back channel.
And so the on channel, I know you said, it's using reason, logic, it's thinking things through, but does it do anything else?
Yeah, one of its really important jobs, I mentioned that the back channel pushes forward thoughts and behaviors through impulses and urges and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the on channel's really important jobs is to monitor those urges and impulses. And if it detects something that may be inappropriate, to override that or to redirect it to be more appropriate. And you can probably think back of if you've ever been in a meeting or with a group of friends, or maybe it's a larger group and you know some of the people, but some of them you don't know very well, and you're having a conversation and a thought pops into your mind and you start to say it because you think this will be funny, and you start to say it, and just as you start to say it, you stop yourself, and about 3 seconds later you go, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I didn't say. If I would have said that, I didn't realize that so and so is here that's a friend to so and so, and I would have insulted them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're like
Yeah.
me, you don't catch it in time and you go ahead and blurt something out, and then everybody looks at you like, what, why did you say that? And you're like, oh man, that was really stupid, why did I say that? And
You
it's
stole
because
my thunder, because that's usually me. You brought up a meeting or a group of friends, and I just blurted out. So is my on channel just not functioning properly? Because I don't redirect those behaviors and impulses.
yeah, it takes practice. So
Mm.
your mind is a muscle, and I know you know about working out and like the jujitsu, all the kind of stuff takes so much effort and repetition and work and practice to get to the point where you can do it appropriately. And that's the same thing with the on channel. You can practice monitoring your back channel and get better at it. And I'm saying that, and I know since you know me, you're going to say, "Yeah, physician, heal thyself," because I haven't practiced enough myself. But that's something you can practice and get better at.
Oh,
I mean, the best way is
okay.
just keeping your mouth shut, and then you don't ever blunder into anything.
That might be the answer. Just don't say anything ever, Sean.
I had
Um,
somebody tell me once. They said, "This person, man, they are so smart. This person's really smart." They kept talking about how brilliant and smart this person was, and I said, what makes you, I mean, how are you saying, what makes you say they're so smart? And they said, because when we're talking, they just sit and look at you and kind of nod their head. They never say anything. They're so smart. So, I mean, if you're quiet, people think you're smart, even if you're not. So that's another little mechanism you can use in your
That might
phone.
be the life hack that I need, John.
Yeah, exactly.
Over all of this understanding my brain stuff, just Sean, be quiet is what I'm hearing from this episode. So going back now to the two on channel, back channel, and the back channel, it's making me think of all these questions. So I'm trying to put them in an appropriate order, but I'm thinking about just my day, an average day,
Mm-hmm.
not, even if you're thinking about work, right? But I wake up in the morning. From the time I wake up and go through whatever morning routine, go to work, do that whole day, I'm feeling like that whole day is not the whole day. That this is my question. How much of that day am I actually, I don't want to say in charge of, but how much of that day is my on channel involved with my day?
I don't I don't think you want to know the answer to that
Oh
question
no.
because I
Maybe
don't
that
like the
maybe I
answer. I don't like the
maybe I
answer to
shouldn't
that
have
question.
asked.
What is it they say about attorneys? Good attorneys don't ask questions that they don't already know the answer to, because
Hmm.
I do that too. I'll look for the answer and then I'm like, I just wish I didn't know that answer. I was happier before I knew it. The answer is we're in control of very little of what's going on, and if you think about it, there's no way to really know and measure as things are happening. But if you think about, like, why did you, as you're working, why do all of a sudden you think, oh, I'm going to get up and go because it's almost lunch? Or what makes you look at the clock on your computer to say, oh, it's lunchtime? And it's not that you decided to do that. It's that there's a drive for hunger. One of the drives is to eat, to survive. So that hunger drive forced you to say, hey, it's time we get moving, go find food. And you glance at the clock and go, oh, yeah, it's time to go get food. Or it's things like that that you're not aware of. So it's really hard to detect when that's happening. But almost everything we're doing is kind of comes down to those urges and impulses. And then it makes you go, oh, man, I like to think I have free will. And so that kind of
Hmm.
destroys that idea of free will. If I don't have choices, that's bad. And there's a neuroscientist back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, that came up with this idea. It's Donald Hebb, and he was studying this, and he was using an EEG to measure when people would press a button and tell them to, you know, when they felt like they wanted to press it, or to do it. And he set up this really clever design, experimental design, where he showed that when somebody said they were watching a clock of when they decided to press the button. So when they decided to press it, he was showing that their brain activity had started ramping up about a half a second before they decided to press the button. So the brain had already decided, hey, we're about to decide to press the button, so let's become active. And so the idea was, oh, wow, we don't have free will at all. And then he did a follow-up study, and I'm not being probably as accurate as I should on these, but the follow-up study was something like, when you feel the urge to press the button, just stop yourself and don't press it. And so it showed the brain about a half a second ramping up to when they said they felt the urge, but they didn't. And as soon as they didn't press it, that brain activity dropped off. So it didn't continue to rise to the button press. So he came up with the idea that maybe it's not free will, it's free won't. So the on channel's act of free will is deciding not to do something or to override an urge or an impulse. Because if we waited for our on channel to think through what we need to do at any given time, it would take so much longer to do anything, and it could be really dangerous. We need our back channel just set in the automatic mode that's just initiating everything to keep us safe and to conserve energy and to do what it needs to do to keep us healthy and alive. And then the on channel can override some of those urges and impulses. So free will is probably more like free won't.
I've never heard that before. Free won't. That's interesting. And then, so I'm also thinking about, um, so you brought up automaticity for the back channel,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
how does the on channel, this is where I may confound myself with this question, but does the on channel has to learn what to redirect to? I'm thinking about like social.
Mm-hmm.
social cues, social how to behave. We're in a group of friends, and you're saying that my on channel is in charge of uh, stopping or redirecting urges and impulses that might embarrass me, anger someone, all of those things. But how does the on channel learn? How does it know what to let go and what to stop?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it has to learn that at some point. So you're not born with the appropriate social rules that you're going to grow up in because there's so many different societies and cultures and things like that. So you learn through lived experiences. So as you're in a group and you see somebody say something inappropriate and you see how the group reacts to them, your back channel, because of that survival mode, it thinks, oh man, we can't do that. We better not ever do that because that's social suicide. Like I don't want to be ostracized because so it's not physical life or death, but it's social life and death, which can be is a
Mm-hmm.
really powerful motivator too. So I want to stay socially relevant and on the in group, and I don't want to be ostracized. And that person said something really inappropriate. And when they were called out, they just doubled down on it. And now they're kind of out of the group. People don't want to deal with them. So I learned that. And then I see somebody else do something like that, and they immediately go, "Oh, I'm so sorry, man. That was awful what I said. I'm going to, and then they're kind of let back in. So I'm watching all of this, and these all become part of my lived experiences. And then as I do or say something that's inappropriate, then it's like I figure out how I can kind of maneuver through that to survive. And those are the things that you learn. You can get it from your friend group. You can get it from watching television shows, from reading books, reading
Mm-hmm.
stories. In fact, the narrative is the best way to hear it, reading books or hearing stories or hearing parents or aunts and uncles talk to you about things and what's appropriate and what's not. All of those, your brain's taking in and learning. And so it's not just your on channel that learns from that, your back channel learns from lived experiences. So if it says something, if it pushes forward an impulse to say something, you blurt something out that has a kind of a negative ramification to that, then the back channel also learns from that, and it's less likely to have that urge push forward again to say something similar in the future. So it changes what it pushes forward as well. It doesn't keep making the same mistake over and over. It will
Oh,
learn as
oh,
well.
okay.
But your on channel still has to say, because there can be a situation where if you're with two of your friends and you say something that it's okay, and I'm not talking about something that's really bad, like something that's racist or whatever. I'm just saying if you make a joke that your two friends, you actually gain social credibility from that with those two friends. But if there's a third friend there, you lose that social credibility. So your back channel
Mm-hmm.
can't always decipher that type of stuff. So it knows that, oh, if I say this in front of these two friends, I'm going to get, so it'll push forward an urge to say something funny for them to laugh. But your on channel has to think, wait, this third person's here. I need to monitor this. So yeah, there's learning to all of this.
And those examples you're bringing up are really powerful. That's a powerful way to learn. Is that being embarrassed or being even worse, cut out of the friend group or frozen out, whatever you want to call it. That's and so I'm thinking about like going to school, going to a public school, even starting in kindergarten. You're starting to learn the social kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and not being taught by someone telling you do this, don't do this, but it's those interactions with friends. And
Exactly.
and you're saying that both the on channel and the back channel are learning from those experiences.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That is helpful for me.
And the also, something to, I don't want to get too deep into this, but something else to consider, especially kind of in the climate and culture we're living in right now here in America, those social rules change. And so because of the society we're in, I feel like that our rules are changing to where it's not just to try to avoid being ostracized, like you don't want to just make sure you don't say the wrong thing so you get cut out. But there's this part of it now where there's such a big divide that if you say something that one group thinks is the wrong thing, that gives you extra status in the other group. And so it's not just to say what one group wants to hear, but if you say it in a way that really infuriates the other side, then you get even more social status. And so you see people who seemed reasoned and thoughtful and kind of smart on some of their ideas and thoughts, that as they start speaking publicly and getting one group to really say this is great and start to support them, their views and ideas start getting kind of more radicalized to fit that group, to become to gain more social status within one group. Because if you're moderate, you don't gain social status in either group. So now you've got to learn, and your back channel's learning, and your on channel, and a lot of times, so your back channel almost always leads the way, and you can't always reason out why you're wanting to always say certain things or do certain things, that your back channel's pushing forward these impulses and urges. It's because it's learned those patterns faster than your on channel does. And so it's usually ahead of the game in that sense. And sometimes you don't even realize for a while why you have certain feelings or why you're thinking a certain way. But your back channel catches on to that because it sees the patterns of who's getting promoted and who's getting demoted, and it understands that pattern way faster than your on channel does.
Really?
Yeah. So, but we should probably steer away from that topic.
Well, no, I'm more on. I mean, your point is valid, and it helps for me to understand even more about the back channel. But what you just said that is causing me to really reflect on this is that the back channel is learning these things so much faster than the on channel, that I might be doing things, saying things, or even you said feeling things, and and my on channel hasn't really picked up on what's going on yet. The back channel's way ahead of this.
Yes.
And that is, like, again, breaking my brain a little bit, that I may have thoughts and feelings that I don't even know why I have them.
I would say a large portion of them are probably that way.
But if asked why I feel the way that I do, so let's see if I can ask you this the right way to elicit the response I'm looking for. If you were to ask me, I make a statement or say I feel a certain way, and you go, really, why do you feel that way? If my on channel hasn't caught up to that, what happens in that instance? What happens to my on channel?
You will give your best guess, and you won't realize it's a guess. You'll think that that's probably the answer, and so you'll tell why your back channel is doing what it's doing without fully understanding the answer. So if you want to learn more about this, you should go. I think you can find this on YouTube as well. But Michael Gazzaniga has done a ton of research on split brain patients, and these are patients that had to have surgery because of epileptic seizures, where they would, if they're grand mal seizures, where a seizure starts on one side of the brain and goes to the other side of the brain, and this is where people will fall down and convulse because all of their brain is under seizure. Then one way to stop that is there's a little band of fibers that connect the two hemispheres of the brain. And if you sever that band of fibers, you stop the seizure from traveling across the whole brain. It just isolates it to one hemisphere. And so this isn't something you do for anybody who has seizures, but if they're extreme and they're dangerous, it can be a way to help the person survive by separating that. But then you have what's called a split brain, because now you have conscious awareness, kind of the on channel on one side, and it's more than the on channel. I mean, the back channel's on both sides, but it's you have this side of your brain that has language that can talk about what it's doing, but the other side of your brain doesn't have language, and so it's acting in ways. And his lab found out ways to give the non-language brain information and have it respond to that information, and then have the language side of the brain explain why they just did what they did. and they come up with logical reasons that have nothing to do with why the non-language brain did what it did, but to them that's what made sense, and they put things together. It's captured in this great series of videos. Alan Alda kind of headed up the video series. So if you go to
Oh, I love Alan.
YouTube
I
and
love
look
his
at,
voice.
yeah, Alan Alda and Split Brain, and because Gazzaniga is hard to spell, so just do Alan
Yeah.
Alda Split Brain. There's some amazing videos there that describe this, and then you realize, wow, when I do something and I try to figure out why I did it, I'm probably not very accurate. Even though I feel very confident in why I did something, I may not be very accurate at all.
Ooh, so maybe wading into more dangerous territory, but with my law enforcement background, it makes me think about times that I've been asked why I did something. So, you go into a stressful situation, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's survival stress, and go in and something happens, and then later asked about it. My on channel is going to give the best guess.
Yes, man, you're right. This is dangerous waters. So I want to be really
Maybe I
careful how.
shouldn't.
No, I want to be really careful how I answer this, because each individual incident and each individual person is different. So what
True,
I'm saying
true.
doesn't apply to a specific incident, but just remember when you ask an officer why they did something, you're asking their on channel because it's the one that
Yes.
can respond and answer. So it's aware of the question, it
Hmm.
gives the answer, and it's basing the answer on what it remembers from the incident based on how it feels now, adding in the context of how it was trained. So you're trained that there's certain things that have certain meanings and certain ways you do things. There's policies and procedures. And as a police officer, I'm sure you wanted to follow those policies and procedures and do things the right way. So then when they say, why did you do that? Your reasoning includes those policies and procedures that you're following, not because you're trying to be deceitful. It's because, of course, I always try to follow those policies and procedures. So now you're kind of couching it in, I always try to follow those policies and procedures. So therefore, I was also following them this time. And you may be right in how you describe it, but you may not be right, but you'll never know because there's
Yeah.
no way to tap into the non-conscious and say, what was it really thinking? There's no device. We can't put any scanner on the head or put an EEG on somebody and figure out why they're doing stuff or what they're thinking. That's all hidden. And cognitive psychologists for a long time have referred to it as a black box. We know what we're putting into the black box and we know what's coming out of the black box, but we have no idea what's going on inside the black box. It's all hidden from us.
Wow. Well, and then also there's the idea of schemas, since we brought that
Yeah.
up earlier, and I like saying the word, like I said, but in my example or my question, um, if it's something I've done a bunch of times, I have a schema for how that probably went that I'm relying on.
It's exactly right. Yep.
Huh.
And your brain
Wow.
also, there's
Okay.
another part of your brain that fills in the gaps. So if you're missing a little bit of information, it fills in the gaps with patterns and schemas that you already know about and the policies and procedures. And you don't even realize there was a gap there that you just filled in. It's because if you're, again, that's the 1% of the time that you think, man, I wish I knew what I was really thinking. But the 99% of the time, you don't want to know where all the gaps are. You just want to feel like your life that you're living is just a seamless transition and you're taking in information, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're getting where you're supposed to get. And there's not all of these issues and problems going on. But the back channel is taking care of all those issues and problems so that the on channel isn't aware of them and doesn't feel them, because that would be a miserable way to live. So it fills
Yeah.
in the gaps. It uses schemas and patterns. It makes best guesses. It anticipates things. All of these are what the back channel is doing to help the on channel live a kind of a seamless life where it doesn't realize all the noise and the problems and the chaos that goes on in taking in information and processing it.
Because it seems like I'm thinking about, like I brought up a daily routine, and whatever a daily think of whatever your daily routine is. You get up in the morning, and make coffee, have coffee, take a shower, brush your teeth, whatever the order is, get dressed. And that, includes picking out what you're going to wear, putting on your shoes, grabbing so you get my point. I don't want to belabor it, but all the things that I go through to go to work, and then I drive to work, and then I do my job, and then I drive home, and then I eat dinner and I go to bed. Let's call that the day.
Mm-hmm.
If my on channel was responsible for everything I just laid out, there wouldn't be enough time in the day. I just described like a 30-hour day, maybe. I don't know the real number, but if it was only my on channel that had to think about tying my shoes, think about how to put toothpaste on the toothbrush, how to brush my teeth. I don't even know and I'm not asking you for the real number because that's impossible, but
yeah, you're exactly right. You would probably have to take a nap after breakfast before you drove to work. Like after doing all this stuff, if your on channel is responsible for all of that, you would be exhausted and depleted, and you would have to take a nap. Physical labor exhausts you, and we all know what that's like, but mental labor also exhausts you. Like if you've ever been where you've had to think really hard or solve problems, or you have to answer really tough questions for an hour, like on a podcast about the brain, anything like that, you can get mental exhaustion is real too, where you're like, oh man, I am just exhausted and tired. So now you walk out and go, I've been doing an hour podcast, and my wife has been doing whatever she's doing, like the physical labor for an hour. And I go, I'm exhausted. And she's like, you think you're exhausted, which is true. It's like physical labor. It looks like that's more exhausting, but mental exertion is exhausting too. And you probably wouldn't even make it to lunch if your on channel had to take care of everything. Because remember, in the middle of brushing your teeth, you have to think, oh yeah, take a breath so that I don't suffocate, and oh yeah, my heart needs to beat a couple times, and oh yeah, regulate my hormones, and yeah, all of that stuff too. So
everything the back channel takes care of for me.
Yeah. So getting back to kind of bringing it back around to these two, system 1 and system 2. The system 1 is the back channel, and system 2 is the on channel. Kind of getting back to that, I think that I can use that information now that you're kind of understanding where I'm coming from to answer your original question. And why did you get in the left turn lane to turn onto Tyler Street when you wanted to go straight? And so let's think about that now that we kind of know about the on channel, back channel. So you said that you had 3 stores to go to. You went to one. And then as you're leaving that store, you're thinking, these are the next 2 that I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to store B and then store C. Yes. So you had 2 intentions at that point, store B and store C. Those are conscious goals. So those are on-channel goals that you're thinking. Your on-channel is thinking, these are the 2 things we want that I want to do. Your back channel has habits. And one of the habits, and we were just talking about this, like brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, driving to work. One of the habits is driving your car. And when you first learn to drive, if you can remember back, it's very taxing. Your on channel has to control everything. Like, I have to be in this lane. I have to make sure I'm not hitting the curb. And so you're watching the curb, you're watching the lanes, and then I'm coming up. I've got to turn here. Oh, when am I supposed to put my blinker on? I'm supposed to put it on now. I've got to hit the brakes. So you hit it too hard and you kind of slam the brakes on, then you speed up a little, and then you get to the corner and you start to turn. You think, oh, I've got to accelerate through the turn because you don't want to stop halfway through. And there's just so much going on, and it's so difficult. And in like a year later, you're driving with your knee, adjusting the radio with the drink in one hand and not paying attention to anything. It's like all of that's been automatized. The on channel, it got shifted into the back channel. So you can think of your back channel as it wants to conserve resources. It doesn't want your on channel spending any more resources than it needs to, because it's going, hey, I've got to protect these resources because we have to survive. So it's saying, is this something we're going to be doing a lot, like driving this car? Because if so, we'll just make that a subroutine in the back channel that we'll take care of that the on channel doesn't have to worry about. So now driving, so that's the autopilot part of it. It's saying, is this something we're going to be doing a lot? Is tying our shoes something we're going to be doing a lot? Because we'll just make that automatic. And I don't want to, everybody hates braggers. I don't want to brag, but I do have to say that I've gotten so good at tying my shoes, I can do it with my eyes closed. I don't know if you've ever tried that, but that's how good I've gotten at tying my shoes. And then brushing your teeth is the same way. You can think about other things now and do the up and down and side to side and all of that. You don't have to think about it. Driving, you don't have to think about. So all of those become automatized, and you can think of them as habits. So the back channel has these habits. So now you have the on channel intention of going to store B and then store C, and the back channel is going, okay, we got the autopilot to get you from store to store B and store C. But the back channel is not good at sequential things, of remembering a long sequence of things. That's an on channel task. So it's thinking, I've got to do, I'm basically doing the task that's in front of me. So I don't know exactly why you pulled into the left lane, but I think that I can give a couple of guesses. One might have been more of a, like the path of least resistance. So your brain's saying, we have to go to store B and then store C and then go home. So let's just take a shortcut and hit store C so we can get home. So it might have been that path of least resistance, or it might have been that you were saying, let's go to store B and then store C. And since it's not good at sequences, it heard store C as the last thing it heard. So it's saying, all right, we'll go to store C. Like if you would have said, I'm going to go to store C, but before that, I'm going to go to store B, maybe it would have gone to B because that's the last thing it heard. So your on channel can logically decipher those two, but your back channel can't. So I don't know what the reason was, but there's a part of your brain, the basal ganglia, that controls habits, and it's going, this is our habit. We're going to go. We know how to get to the store. We know how to get to stores because we can drive. It's hard. So if it's the same thing as if you decide, like on a Saturday, let's say you work Monday through Friday, and on Saturday you decide you're going to go to the grocery store, and you've got a lot on your mind. So as you pull out of your driveway, you're thinking about so many different things, and all of a sudden you realize you're turning that last corner before you get to work, and you're going, what? Why did I just come to work? Because if your back channel isn't clear on what the task is, it falls back on its best habit. Like I can't remember. I don't know exactly where we're going, but I know we almost always go to work. So let's just go there. And so you have to, if you're consciously aware of what's happening, you're less likely, if you're paying attention to where you're driving and you're thinking about where you're going and why, those are instructions the back channel's getting, and it goes where you're wanting it to go. But if you get really sidetracked or distracted, like in a conversation, then it's more likely to take the path of least resistance, or go to the last place that you said, or go to a familiar place like work or something like that. And then there's one other thing I want to mention. There's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate colliculus. So anterior cingulate cortex, that the ACC for short, it's the error detector in your brain. So if there's ever an error, it sounds the alarm bells. Or if there's a mismatch, it sounds the alarm bells. And it kind of works with the on channel and back channel to monitor. And so at some point when you're sitting in that lane, the ACC was like, hey, this doesn't match. Turning left on Tyler doesn't match our intention, our on-channel goal of going to store B. So it's like a surprise, like, what am I doing? I think you said, what am I doing in the turn lane? You just said it out loud.
I said out loud, why am I in this lane?
Yeah.
And so that was the ACC sounding the alarm bells.
Yeah,
that
saying
caused
there's
me
a
to say
mismatch.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were supposed to go to store B, and you're in the left turn lane to go to store C. That's a mismatch. And it's kind of like a surprise, like, whoa, why am I in this lane? And so
I was very surprised by that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if the on channel's in charge more of the time, that's less likely to happen. But a conversation. So you were saying that, I was thinking about in the state that I live in, and I think it's in all states, the big thing about distracted driving,
Mm-hmm.
And so people thought in the beginning, and still think, because I see it all the time, but that you shouldn't have the phone up to your ear and talking. So I see people driving with their phone in their hand, and they're having a conversation with someone on the phone.
It's the angle of the arm and the shoulder. If it gets too bent, then you can't focus.
Got
But
it.
if you keep that angle straighter, no, it's crazy because there's also rules about what's it called where you put your phone on mic like it's
Yeah,
over
hands free
the
drive.
hands free.
But
Thank you.
or yeah, I was just going to say, forget about my extreme example. Your phone is connected to your car, and you're talking to someone through your car speakers. Let's say
Yeah, yeah, and
you
so
don't even
there's
have the
that.
phone in your hand.
Right. And so a phone in your hand up to your ear, they found was distracted driving and causes accidents. So then when they
Mm-hmm.
studied hands free, where it's over your speaker, it causes accidents. And in fact, there's not that much of a difference between the two. And so it comes, and then you say, well, that doesn't make sense because I can have somebody sitting beside me and talking to them. That's like talking hands free. How can I be talking to them hands free and everything's fine, but then when I'm on my phone hands free, it's not. And it's because the person on the phone is not in the car with you. So if the person
Mm-hmm.
sitting beside you, if all of a sudden traffic starts to get really heavy and slow down and they're right in the middle of a story, they'll slow down and maybe even stop talking. It's like,
Stop
because
talking.
they're looking at it
Yeah.
going, whoa, this traffic's getting bad. And that allows you to disengage from that conversation, go, whoa, traffic is getting bad. But if you're talking to somebody hands free, they're still just da 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 right in the middle of the story, and you're focusing. It's harder to shift, and it takes longer to shift to tune them out to pay attention to the road when you've been paying attention to them. So
Hmm.
it is still distracted driving even when it's hands free.
Well, good. I'm glad that there's research out there that proves my gut feeling is right about distracted driving. So that makes me feel better. So number one, thank you for answering my question. That was really informative for me. I have one more question. I won't take too much more of your time, but I would like to introduce this final segment, which right now I'm calling debunking brain myths,
Mm-hmm.
because I think I hear a lot of these things, and I think that people hear them and then repeat them. And the one that's been on my mind lately, the one that I hear the most is, as humans, we only use 10% of our brains. And it felt really relevant from how you were describing the brain and the mind. I just wanted to ask you, is that true? Do humans only use 10% of their brains?
Yeah, I've heard this a lot too. And in fact, when I was a professor in the classroom, I would have students ask this and say, "Is it true we only use 10% of our brains?" And I would say, "Yes, that is true. So, what do you guys think would happen if we could start using 20% of our brains? Like what areas would we improve in?" And then they would be like, "Oh, well, we would get a lot smarter, or we could do things a lot more efficiently and a lot faster." I said, what if we could use 30% of our brain or 40% of our brain? And at some point, it got to where all of the gains that we were getting, we'd already got all the gains by 50%. Now 60% of the brain. Now we're talking about telekinesis, and we're talking
Right? Can
about
I move
moving
objects with my mind at this
and
point?
moving objects. That's at like 70%. And it's just all of this stuff
Yes,
that
I
we could
love
do,
it.
which sounds so exciting. And then I would have to tell them the bad news that actually we use 100% of our brain. I mean, that's the part of conserving resources, and we only need what we use, and we only use what we need. And it's like, if we only use 10% of our brain would be a tenth the size it is, because that's all we would need. You don't need to fuel the rest of something that you're not even using. That's just wasteful. And so there's other studies that will show, like, if you hook the brain up, even when people are asleep, your brain is still working and firing, and neurons are still, even if they're not processing something within a moment, they'll send signals to keep active and to keep connections going. And unfortunately, we are using 100% of our brain 100% of the time, but that doesn't mean we can't do things to use it more efficiently. So we can always find ways to be more efficient, to be better, to be smarter. while we're still using that 100%. It's just we'll use it a little bit
Okay.
differently. Yeah. So that is a
Okay.
myth,
So
and that needs to be debunked because I
good
just
news,
saw a
bad
stat
news.
that
Yeah.
what's that?
It's good news, bad news for me. We were able to debunk a brain myth, but I can't move objects with my brain. I can't
Yeah,
get there.
that is the bad news.
What was the
Yeah.
stat that you saw?
Well, over 2/3 of Americans believe that we only use 10% of our brain. I think it was the Michael J. Fox Foundation did the study a couple years ago. So it's unfortunate that many people believe it, but yeah, it is kind of good news, bad. That's another one that I said, be careful of what you ask, because then you find out the answer and you're like, that's disappointing. I wanted to move
I'm
objects with my
disappointed.
brain.
Yes.
Now I
Yeah.
have to get up and walk over and move an object. That's not
It's a lot
conserving
of work.
resources.
Nope. It's a lot of effort. Well, John, thank you for taking the time today to help me learn about my brain. That was really informative. And I've got some new words, some new language, on channel and back channel. And I know
Yes.
the difference between the brain and the mind.
Awesome. Yeah, and keep that on channel, back channel lingo, because we'll use that on future podcasts as well.
Sounds great. Thank you again.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay.
Talk later.
Yep.